Actually, one second. All right, I'm going to get rolling here because Jamie went like 10 minutes over. So, all right, and I don't want to delay the PM keynote because she's much more important than I am. So, I'm Kevin Cody at Kev Cody on Twitter. We're going to be talking about mobile application privacy and analytics. Like I said, Kev Cody. I'm from Pittsburgh. Anyone Pittsburgh here? Yeah. I'm a principal application security consultant with Invisium. Invisium is an AppSec boutique consulting company. So if you have any questions about them, see me afterwards. But I'm not here for them. I'm here because I enjoy Cleveland. I've been here many, many times. First time speaker at BSides Cleveland, but this is one of my favorite cons. If you've heard me give talks before, I always go through the same spiel, so I apologize at the beginning here, but I'm a bit of a vulnerability stumble upon most of you guys know I fall ass first into stuff and then get lucky, but that's me. Moving on here. One more shout out to BSides Pittsburgh because when I was there, I shouted out to here, so now I'm going to do the favor and shout back out to there. It's close enough that if you're not going to Pittsburgh and you're here, you should be, and vice versa, they should be coming here. All right. So what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to go over why you should care about mobile analytics and privacy. We'll talk about how mobile analytics frameworks work, discuss threats and types of data at risk in mobile applications. I'm going to break down how we can peel back the curtain and look into our mobile apps. I'm going to do a bit of a POC, except I'm going to cut it a little short, A, because I'm a little bit low on time, and B, my test device is sitting at home. So that's not going to work. But I have traffic. We'll go over it. And then some summaries and takeaways. So who here went to Tom Easton's talk at 11? Is Tom out here? Okay. Few people went. He did an awesome job talking about privacy and why you should care about privacy in mobile, in web in general, whether it's mobile, web, or your life, IM, etc. So if you didn't go to his talk, I highly recommend that you look at his materials from today. I'm sure Adrian and his team probably already have his talk out on YouTube, but it was really good, and he went into a lot of things that I am not going to have time to go into. So kudos to Tom. I'm giving him a shout out, but I don't think he's here anymore. Moving on. So one thing about my talk is it's not a Cambridge Analytica clapback. So I developed this talk before all of that Cambridge Analytica stuff hit the news. So that's not my goal here. However, I think it'll be pretty apparent to see why this kind of thing is easily done in the mobile space, and you will probably have some parallels to the Cambridge Analytica junk that you can make from my talk. So again, if you've seen one of my talks, this is like my favorite GIF ever. So this is what we're trying to avoid is the infamous rolling dumpster fire, because the stationary dumpster fire was last year, and this is the infamous rolling one. But in all reality, who here has heard of Zimperium? Couple nods. How about what's the Android lib? It was real big in the rooting a few years ago, and in malware, the Android lib. Anyway, they're the ones who discovered the stage fright. Stage fright. The Zimperium folks are the people who discovered stage fright and all the different Android root vulns that came from stage fright. This is their CTO, I believe. He's Evil Socket on Twitter. And as I was developing this talk, I happened to come across one of his tweets, and I'm just going to verbatim. I'm digging into mobile advertising and data analytics world. The more I dig, the less comfortable I feel about having a smartphone, which is exactly how you should feel after you go see my talk, or sit through my talk, excuse me, and just continue down his thread. He just unravels more and more and more junk that you'll see in my talk here. But it was, a little concerning, because I had already developed this talk, and I'm like, oh, this is all my good stuff. He's dropping it, and did a better job at it. But he actually tweeted at a few folks who, a few apps out there, and was like, hey, why are you doing this? And they came back and they said, oh, well, that's not what we're doing. We're actually doing this, and it's not as bad as you think. And he clapped back at them. It was like, no, it's worse. This is exactly what you're doing. This is why it's bad. So yeah, go out. He's at Evil Socket on Twitter, and it's a really, really good thread. And I have it in my slide notes if you want the URL. So, not too many folks left, unfortunately, but I think I recognize half the people in the crowd, and I know your backgrounds. But anyone out here? Compliance, audit, infosec. Yeah, all right. Just privacy advocates out there, EFF members, people who care about privacy, a few folks, okay. I'm just going to move on from this slide. All right, so with love from Wikipedia, the analytics definition, because I'm going to kind of blur the lines a little bit when it comes to analytics and advertising, because it's a little bit of a strange world in the mobile space where it's tough to really figure out where analytics starts and mobile and privacy leaves off and vice versa. So just to clear things up a little bit, analytics is the discovery, interpretation, and communication of meaningful patterns in data, especially valuable in areas with rich recorded information and da-da-da-da-da. What that actually looks like in the mobile space. Has anyone mess with analytics engines in mobile before, like seen the dashboards? One person kind of raised their hand maybe. Okay, so this is the kind of stuff you see, and you're probably familiar with this. But so this is just using an application, right? You download any application on the market. You don't do anything special. You don't give any special permissions. And this is the dashboard that the app makers can see from you just using the app, right? So here you see JSON client.java. You see the actual line of code, hello world, blah, 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 blah. You can see how many crash reports there are, any fatal, non-fatal, which is interesting. You can see here 38,000 non-fatal, 10K users. Then you can drill down even further, and you can actually see the types of devices that we're used to. But I mean, that's like user agent information, right? We're used to seeing that in the web world. Operating system, Android 4, 5, 2, etc. You can see how many devices are rooted that are using your application. So 11% of the folks using this app were doing so from a rooted device, which is kind of interesting. You can see how much free space these users on average have on their mobile devices. Again, no special permissions. This is just queryable information. How much free RAM they have going on their device. How long your app was in focus when it was open on their device. This one had 87%. So as the user was using the application, 87% of the time it was in focus. They were actually, using it rather than maybe switching back and forth in multitask mode or maybe taking a call or something like that. How many devices had their proximity sensors turned on, etc. So yeah, that's interesting intro into what analytics look like. But I have to take a step back because I'm going to talk and I'm going to shitpost a little bit on analytics. But in reality, businesses have to do business. And, when it comes to IT, security, compliance, pen testers, wherever you fit into the mold, developers, we all work for the business. And without clients, customers, etc., we won't have revenues to pay folks to do the security testing. We don't have revenues to pay the auditors or the security folks or whatnot. So I can shitpost or shit talk or whatever you want to say on these analytic firms or these apps that use these analytics or whatever. But in all reality, insights, click-throughs, diagnostics, debugging, these are important features of our applications. So I'm a pretty even keel person. If you don't know me, I don't have a lot of hardline opinions on anything because I think that middle of the ground is where we should all be. But at the end of the day, this is again where I sit when it comes to the analytics. I think that it's maybe a necessary evil, but just understanding where the bigger picture lies in the data and peeling back the curtain a little bit will help you understand maybe how these apps work. And maybe next time you go to download a native app or whatnot, you might say, I'll just use the web version of that. Or maybe I don't need this on my phone. So don't be an elitist, ivory towerist. That's not where I am. So I'm about to name drop quite a few analytics companies. I'm not necessarily talking bad about any specific companies. So if I do drop them, it's not because I have any axe to grind with them, or have any affiliation with any of them, because I don't. My recommendation is not to roll your own version of this, because I can just see how that would turn out very badly. When you look at some of the information that these analytics are able to obtain, are able to send, receive, store, etc., rolling your own is probably not the best idea. All I can imagine is someone having their own configuration endpoint of some sort that isn't authenticated, and now someone out on the internet is just pulling raw data down and etc. So yeah, maybe stick to the ones that are out there. But of course, configuration, threat modeling, understanding what data this thing is taking and how we can protect it are obviously the keys here. So don't be that person who says, hey, Kevin was talking shit on Crashlytics or something like that, because I promise you I'm not, although they're interesting. All right, so the 6 people in the crowd, you're still with me? Yeah. All right, so when we talk about analytics engines and ad networks, how are they actually embedded into our apps, right? So JavaScript. If I'm embedding third-party JavaScript into my application, what can it do? Anyone? A lot. It can do a lot. Has anyone heard of cross-site scripting? Pretty much everybody? Yeah. So if you're embedding third-party JavaScript into your app, it sounds a whole hell of a lot like cross-site scripting, right? Basically, you're allowing someone to do whatever the hell they want in the JavaScript context of your first-party domain. So yeah, that's a little worrisome. And if you are embedding JavaScript into your apps, how much is dynamically generated at runtime? Or how much can be changed at runtime? So you look at it, you audit it, you fast forward 3 months, and now the back-end lib is totally different than what you looked at. Because JavaScript is fun. So in the same vein, SDK. So if you embed Crashlytics or Amplitude or Firebase or whoever's SDK into your first-party app, what can that do? The answer is anything that the first-party app can do, right? So if you grant permissions for the first-party app, so Facebook, if you give Facebook permission to use your microphone so you can use, and to take a step back for a second, these big apps, Facebook, WhatsApp, Signal doesn't get as bad of a rap, obviously, for the Whisper system folks who run it. But I'm trying to think of that. LinkedIn, right? So you grant them permission to use these different sensors on your devices. And there's usually a reason for it, right? So people say Facebook wants your microphones. They can listen in on your conversations and point ads to you, which has been disproven, hasn't been proved out, etc. In reality, why do they want your microphone? So that you use their FaceTime app or whatever, or voice notes or whatever. They want you to use features that require those sensors. Now, I'm saying they haven't been misused or won't be misused in the future. But every time I see a tweet that goes out that's like, holy shit, look at all this stuff that this app wants me to approve. Why would I ever do it? I'm that guy who responds is like, well, if you want to use the call feature, they need your microphone and they need to be able to do this. If you want to use the camera to post pictures on social media, they need access to the camera and they need access to your photos, right? So don't be that person that immediately takes a step back and says, wow, I can't believe they're asking for all these permissions. Why would you ever do that? But in that same vein, if they, being the primary app, have permissions to query this information, guess who else can query the information? Any SDKs that are embedded into it, including the analytics and advertisers. So if Facebook has the ability to use find your location so that it can mark where you're live checking in at or whatever, and the SDK is embedded into that, if it's not properly tied down, it also has the ability to query your location because it's embedded code into the first-party app. It's in the same context that already has the permission to do that, right? As auditors, compliance, security folks, practitioners in general, are we going beyond certificates of attestation from these providers that are saying this is what we're doing in the analytics space, or this is what we're doing in the this is what we're doing in the there we go. This is what we're doing. This is our certificate of attestation. This is the testing that we're doing. This is the only information we're gathering from your users. Are we going beyond that and actually checking out in a runtime context what's actually going on in the app? The folks with the large budgets probably are. The folks with the small budgets or one-man shops or people who are building applications probably aren't, right? So that's where folks like myself come into play, who are doing research on the side or research for work, and we start peeling back those curtains. So what type of data am I talking about when I say, why the hell are we giving advertisers or analytics firms this type of data? Or what have I seen in my real life? With my eyes, what have I seen in logs, in HTTP requests, in whatever method that I choose? I've seen keys, so like private keys of servers or whatnot. Session IDs. What can you do if you grab someone's session ID, what can you do? Whatever the hell you want. It's their session key, right? If you don't have any type of additional risk guards against someone hijacking a session, which most can't because of all the different factors there, then you have everything. You have the keys to the castle, right? So if you're sending session IDs to a third party, and that third party gets breached, your entire user base is pretty much owned at that point in time. GPS coordinates, I'm going to show you that today. Like, I have GPS coordinates going out to third parties that were collected by first-party apps, and I'll show you that. It happens constantly. IP addresses, DNS, like your local DNS, your local router IP, any kind of PII data you can think of. And, of course, because it just always happens, plain text creds, right? For whatever reason, it's misconfigured, it's never supposed to be stored, it's never supposed to be whatever. They're leaked out, they're added, and I've seen it. I'll continue to see it. But wait. So this is a question, I don't know if it was in Stack Overflow or one of those question forums. Someone posed this question out and it said, what information does redacted store about your app when you use their tool? And I'll just say redacted equals here some major analytics platform. And the exact answer, and I'm going to read verbatim, is great question. We take data privacy extremely seriously and are committed to protect the privacy of both your data as the app developer and your end user's data. We intentionally restrict information we collect to minimize concern. As for what we collect on the app level, we collect basic metadata, including your app's name, bundle ID, package name, icon, version build number, and platform. So we can distinguish your app within your vendor name dashboard. And then it continues at the crash level. We have a list detailed here, but basically we only collect what's necessary to generate crash reports to give you deep, actionable insights. The whole point of using the product. Which is, again, right, you have to take this into consideration. The reason you embed some analytics frameworks is so that you can get insights into your product. So that is important. But wait till I show you the difference between basic metadata, icon, and app bundle name and the shit that this app is sending to the 4 different analytics providers that are embedded into its code. It's staggering. So, and redacted is one of the people that I'm going to show you. So, whoever, I didn't bleep out his name, sorry. Anyway, so Apple is starting to lower the ban hammer a little bit when it comes to GPS cords, lat long. So, Thomas BCN on Twitter posted this out, and it got a lot of traction here in the new iTunes T's and C's for app developers. Apple finally started enforcing guidelines on selling location data. So basically, the reason this made a splash is in the T's and C's, it basically says that you are no longer allowed to give location data gathered by your application to third parties without the explicit consent of those third parties. But even more so, it's against the entire iTunes T's and C's. So they started actually taking apps off the App Store that were doing this, or not letting them update the next time they update, which was awesome. Does anyone know what the caveat to that is? So this is you're not allowed to reiterate, not allowed to give GPS Coords of your user base to third parties without their consent, or it's against their T's and C's. What's the caveat to this? Anyone? Yeah. Yeah. So the answer by the gentleman there was that. Buried further in the T's and C's, it says if you use the product, not quite, because this is actually Apple not enforcing this on themselves. This is Apple on their developers. The caveat here, which I like your answer though, the caveat here is that unless it's for analytic reasons. So if you're explicitly selling it to advertising.com or whoever that doesn't pretend to be a split party, then maybe you will get banned, and it has happened. Specific advertising firms, like straight advertising firms. But if you are an analytics firm that's trying to help your app developers get actionable insights into their customer data, then they're accepted from this process. Which, again, I'm not saying all analytics firms are bad. There are good analytics firms, but the problem with it is analytics firms are third parties, and you can't necessarily attest to their security as well as you can your own. So if they get breached, they're cloud providers. If they get breached, if someone gets your keys, if someone goes directly to them, and your data is being stored in their cloud, and they have your users' Coords, GPS coordinates, then it's bad news. So that's just something to keep in mind. Even though this seems like what Apple is saying is only first-party apps can take this data, you're not allowed to give it to any third parties. That's not actually the case if that third party is supposed to be using it for the better good of your app. Yes, sir?
Would Securus be considered an analytic company?
What's the name?
Securus?
Secure Us. The question is Secure Us an analytics? And I've never... Okay, yeah. So the question was: is Secure Us considered an analytics firm? And in all honesty, I've never looked into them. But from the gentleman here, his answer is, or this continuation of that is that they got breached in the user's location data went with it. So some of the ones that I'll mention here, or not mention specifically, but reference here, it's the same kind of deal. So this is actually breaking news. I added this just today. I think this got released on maybe Thursday or Friday. Has anyone heard of Firebase? Google's Firebase platform? A couple hands. So Firebase, I think Firebase is technically like a database as a service, or JSON storage, NoSQL storage as a service. But it's more than that, because it offers an embeddable SDK, and it can do analytics, and it can do all kinds of user push notifications. So if you use either iOS or Android Firebase SDK, you can actually use their push notification service to push data back and forth to users as well as servers from the app, etc. There's a firm called App Authority, and I can't say whether App Authority is good or bad. I don't have any knowledge of them. What I can say is they put this data behind a paywall, which, or at least like you got to sign up to our newsletter so you can read our full thing, which I wasn't a big fan of. So I took it from Bleeping Computer, who gave me the data without having to sign up for their thing. But App Authority did do some interesting work. They scanned 2.7 million apps for open Firebase backend data, and what they found out was either misconfiguration or embedding the Firebase keys into their apps. They were able to pull out 28,500 vulnerable applications that exposed Firebase credentials or connections or didn't lock down their Firebase DBs or backends. And I'm sorry, excuse me. I apologize. Take that back. There's 28,000 that used Firebase. Out of that 28,000, 3,000 were vulnerable, but that ratio is 10%, which is pretty bad. The majority were Android. There was a subsection that was iOS, which is interesting. But the big headline is down here. There was 100 million user records exposed in that 3,000 applications. And it was all over the map. PII data, PHI data, all kinds of stuff. I have this URL linked in my notes, and I'll throw the notes out in the slide. But, this is exactly the shit that I'm talking about, right? This is exactly, analytics or back-end, providers that you trust are keeping your data safe and, can directly lead to compromise of your user security. Now, Firebase, Google's product, is probably pretty good, and they probably have about 1 million warnings. This is the way you should configure this, or default configurations that don't have it configured this way, or documentation that says this is the best way to configure it. But at the end of the day, 10% of the users that this thing scan, 10% of the applications that were using Firebase expose user creds, right? So that's pretty bad. Or user details, excuse me. So when I'm about to get into some more technical stuff, but when I'm talking about using when I'm talking about analytics abusing your data, there are some prophylactic measures that you can take. So when you use first-party apps, maybe don't use federated authentication if you're worried about that sort of thing. So Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn login, right? So those are for people who want to streamline their process, which is great. I'm not saying anything bad about them, and they can be configured really strongly. But if you're worried about your privacy, maybe don't link Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn to all your other first-party apps, so that this trail can be made, all over the web. Or maybe your takeaway is just be generally more aware of the kind of data that these apps can suck in, and then just be a little bit more selective on which apps you're downloading to your phone, right? There are some more advanced things that you can do. So in Android, you can, modify your Etsy host file or use specialized DNS servers to basically sinkhole the traffic of some of these providers or ad firms or analytics firms. Big caution though, if you do that, it could break functionality of the app, right? If there is a check that says like, hey, is Firebase responding? And you say no, or the app checks it and says no, the app could just break, right? There's also in iOS land. Has anyone used Surge proxy? No one. All right. If you take nothing else away from my talk, if you're a Mac user, go check out nssurge.com. NSSurge is a Objective-C proxy. It's both iOS and Mac land, and it's just incredibly awesome for proxying data on both platforms. And in iOS land, it'll actually set up a full tunnel VPN and then proxy out from that full tunnel. So you can actually proxy cellular traffic. You can proxy traffic that does not obey system proxy, and it does not require jailbroken or root privileges. So it's really, really neat. If you want to see, my coworkers always say I'm going to have the Surge logo tattooed to my chest because I'm always pimping them out a little bit. But it's really, really neat. And if you combine, it's actually the most money I've ever spent on an app from the Apple App Store. It's $50. I've never actually gone out and plunked down $50 for any app. Like it's usually like a movie for my kids or a $2 video game or something like that. And I actually plunked down $50 for an app on iOS. But in the grand scheme of things, a security tool, $50 is nothing, right? But a note on that, if you buy the Mac OS version, you can get a multi-seat license. One of those seats is not for iOS. I learned that the hard way. I bought a 3-seat license thinking, oh, I'll just install it there and iOS and here. And they're like, no, you got to buy that's separate. So for I think it was $60 for a 3-seat license, $50 for the iOS version. But anyway, long story short, I can proxy anything on that device now. It is really slick. You can chain the device to the macOS version, and you can actually proxy by process ID and all kinds of fun stuff. So if you want to see more about that, see me afterwards, and I'll be happy to give you a demo. Okay, so when I talk about inspecting applications, let me break down kind of what my process is and kind of the tools that I use, and you can kind of replicate those on your own. So Burp, anyone in here use Burp? Yeah. Oh, come on. More than 4 people in here use Burp, right? All right, there we go. I mean, I'm not against Zap. I'm not against Fiddler, whatever else you want to use, but Burp's my go-to. I also use jailbroken and rooted devices. So if you're in Android land, obviously the Nexus devices, the Google Pixel devices, they make things really simple for us security folks when it comes to rooting. Jailbroken has actually opened up quite a bit in the iOS 11 land. I remember back in early 9OS 9 days. So like from September when iOS 9 launched a couple years ago to March, there was a 6-month spell where we never thought we were going to see a jailbreak again. We're like, the only people getting jailbreaks were, was it Luca Tedesco, who always drops them but never actually publishes them? And then like the 0-day folks. We thought there wasn't going to be another public jailbreak released for iOS, which kills security researchers like myself who focus on app. I'm not researching for jailbreaks. I have enough on my plate. I can't go out there and research for jailbreaks, but I use them quite extensively when I'm doing research for apps. This phone is not jailbroken. I don't use a jailbroken device for tweaks and downloading games and DRM and all that shit. Like, that's not what I do, but I do want to SSH into my device. I do want to get to the root operating system. I want to dump my keychain. I want to do all this stuff so that I can make apps safer. So that's what I use when I'm looking at these applications. Of course, SSH, SCP, etc. PCAPs, Wireshark. You can either do that on your local network or both my iOS and my Android devices. I actually have packet capture library just built right into it so I can dump the traffic on the device itself. SSL kill switch 2 or Frida. Anyone know what that's used for? Kind of get an idea there. It's for terminating certificate pinning. So in a lot of applications, the way that TLS works is you have a CA, you have intermediary certificates, and then you have your lowest leaf for xyzdomain.com. Actually, Moxie Marlinspike was one of the first people to really talk about certificate pinning. The idea is that if you distribute a thick client app, whether it be via the computer, mobile, whatever, you have the ability to pin to a hashed certificate from that app because you're distributing a thick client, whatever. That idea was expanded upon in the HPKP protocol thing, which has now been kind of deprecated for the web land. But long story short, it's stuck in the mobile world. How many people here have heard of certificate pinning or have run into it? Yeah, there's a lot of hands. So I think it was ISEC Partners or NCC. They came out with a tool that's out on their Git, SSL Kill Switch and SSL Kill Switch 2. And it actually just toggle off. It breaks all the TLS validation. So don't use it on anything that you actually care about security. But by doing that, it also lets you bypass the validation on the certificate pinning, which allows you to now proxy applications that pin to certificates. Frida, anyone here heard of Frida? One, two, no. So Frida is a dynamic instrumentation tool. It's actually available on macOS, iOS, QNX, Android, every flavor of Linux, Unix out there. I know Windows. So basically, there's a server that runs locally. It has all these API hooks into it, and then you write JavaScript code or Python code or whatever, and you interface with these hooks. And basically, it allows you to do runtime swizzling and manipulation of an application. And what I use Frida for is actually grabbing that certificate and pinning at runtime, swizzling it over to my own certificate, and now I'm pinning to my certificate, which allows me to inspect the traffic. And there's also free dump, which is a Python module that was built to dump memory of whatever device Frida's running on. So now I can just dump out iOS memory. Now I can inspect it for keys, inspect it for whatever. It's pulled down dynamically at runtime. So yeah, this is kind of my toolkit for looking at applications and just weeding out what kind of shit they're doing with the analytics and advertising and whatnot. Burp specifically, I have several extensions that I use. JSON beautifier, a lot of the analytics use JSON. It's hard to look at JSON. You know, that's one of the benefits of YAML. YAML's a little bit easier to read. JSON's not as easy to read. So JSON beautifier is nice. Decompressor. Decompressor is an extension that will actually identify compressed payloads in the body or in the response of HTTP bodies or responses, and it will detect it and automatically add a decompressed tab to your traffic. So now you don't have to go through and say, copy this, send it to decoder, choose gzip, see the response back, see there's my social security number, go back, try to edit that, you don't have to do all of that because the decompressor will actually help you there. But there is a restriction to that. For gzip, the entire body has to be gzipped. After the headers, the entire request or response has to be fully gzipped. Say you have a post and the actual form is the value of the form is gzipped, but everything else in the post is plain text. You're not going to be able to decompress it with decompressor. You'll have to go through that extra work. Of course, filters, search, regex, decoder, et cetera, et cetera. So that's burp. Very important if you're doing privacy and mobile analytics research, whatever you do, don't send non-in-scope data to the ether, because what you're looking for is non-in-scope data, right? So let me give you an example. If I am looking at one-line messenger and trying to see where my shit is going to all these different domains, but I say one line is the only domain that's in scope and forget about the traffic for all the rest of the domains, I'm not going to see Crashlytics or Firebase or whatever, right? I'm only going to see oneline.com or whatever I have to my scope. So that's really important. And actually, from a pen tester or AppSec guy, don't ever do that. Manually go in and select it unless you know for sure there's no other domains, because you could be missing a lot of important information if you check that. Some hurdles to doing this research: obfuscation layers, compression, like I mentioned before, encryption. Some of these analytics and advertisers, they use full encrypted bodies. So that's where you would want to dump the memory, get the key, the encryption, and then maybe use a different tool to decrypt that or whatnot. And to be honest, knowing what is sensitive data to me is very personal to me. And so say I see Kevin's social, because I'm just dumping a bunch of stuff and I see Kevin's social security number. What does that look like to me? Looks like a phone number, a zip code with an extra 4 on the end, whatever. It doesn't look like anything to me unless I can easily see like Kevin, SSN, : whatever, right? So the problem with doing a lot of this research is just knowing what is sensitive information to everybody, right? So if I see my email, my antenna pops up. But if I see your email or your whatever, it may not send off alarms for me. So some trick of the trade: when you are looking for data leakage via analytics or privacy, and you're testing new apps, create new accounts. Don't forget to go through the account creation process, because a lot of time that's where the whole thing gets seeded. So if you just jump into an app that you're already authenticated to, you could miss some data leakage. You could miss some key things. Capture that flow, create new unique IDs, names, email addresses. That way, you can differentiate and see that new stuff. Log out of the application and log back in. If you're just testing and looking for important or data leakage and you don't log out, you might miss that flow as well. When you log back in, a flurry of data could go out to a third party that you might see. Try and cause a local crash of the application for that crash dump to occur. Now, I'm not saying send shit to a server for an app that you don't have permission to test. I can't allow you to test a third party, but if you can create a local crash on your local device, fuzzing, right? You might see some interesting stuff sent to the third parties. And then make sure that you're looking at the local logs of the device. So if you're using Android, you can do the logcat. If you're using iOS, you can look at the system log, the console. And what you might see are advertisers trying to query data that the operating system says you can't. I just saw that the other day. I saw a major top 10 kind of application in the App Store. I was tailing my Android logs, and I saw access denied, access denied, access denied. What the hell is this? What process ID is it coming from? I look, and it's coming from, top 10 app. What is it trying to do? It was trying to query restricted information on my device, and Android operating system was like, no, can't do that. That's deprecated. But if I was running like Android 4.2, it probably would have allowed it because things weren't as strict back, with SE Linux and whatnot. So I just spit out a bunch of tricks of the trade, things. I have a little bit of time. I'm going to. I told you I wasn't going to shame. I'm going to do a little bit of shaming real quick. I just downloaded in the top 10 apps. Half the apps are owned by the same company. It's like, half the apps are owned by Facebook, half the apps are owned by Twitter, so I went to the first app that I came to in the top 10 that wasn't like one of those big names and happened to be Letgo. Has anyone heard of Letgo? They have those commercials on TV that it's like, hey, I'm skydiving, but I want to sell a bowling ball, and this person skydives down next to me, and it's like, I want to buy that bowling ball, and here you go. And it's for like peer-to-peer Craigslist type selling. Oh, I'm sorry. By the way, here is NS Surge, if you were interested in that, which is, again, see me after. So this is Letgo, and I'm not going to look at their first-party communication, right? Anything to the Letgo domain. That's not what I'm talking about here. But what you probably can't see from back there, hold on a second. So this traffic is just for one app, and maybe some iOS stuff. But I'm just going to count out loud. MoPub, Amplitude, Lean Plum, Apps Flyer, New Relic, which, more Apps Flyer. Those are all third-party analytics and aggregation services for different stuff. And this is one of the apps that, as I was using it, I saw my precise, like down to the whatever, power of, or a decimal place of location services that was going out to third parties as I was using the app. And this is one of those apps. It's like, you need to tell it where you are. That's how it works. It's peer-to-peer selling. So it says, I'm here in Cleveland Heights or wherever we are. Josh is a mile away and he wants to buy it. And I only want to look in this mile away, et cetera. So you have to use location to really use the service. So just to give you an idea, this is a post to Crashlytics. It's a report. This wasn't a crash report. This is just a random report from the device as I was using it. And this may be like that screenshot that I showed you that was like, this is the only information we collect from the device. We only get your icon, and we only get this, and this is the only thing sent. Well, if you look at the body, it's gzip. This is one of those that I said, like, if you use the decoder extension, because the body is actually a post form and there's these non-gzipped data, unfortunately, it's not going to be decoded by decompressor or inflated by decompressor. But 1 second. I'm going to send this to decoder and show you the information that was sent from my device to their server. Again, not a crash. It's going to be hard to show this actually. Let me zoom out just a little bit. All right, so saying log, message, there's this big crazy thing, times, etc. But as I scroll down, you'll start seeing code paths, you'll start seeing parameters, you'll start seeing my GPS, you'll start seeing, all kinds of, here, this is actually listing out user lib SQLite, frameworks, dynamic libraries. This is stuff that's on my device. And if you look, one of these is tweak inject. That's because I'm using a jailbroken device. So it's now fingerprinting me and know that I'm using a jailbroken device, and it's listing all this shit out. Again, system, all kinds of different libs that are, this is all obtained via using one first-party app without any real extreme permissions other than GPS. And it's sending all this shit to a third party. And not one third party, like 6 different third parties. That all of those you have to consider, are we doing appropriate threat modeling? Are we doing reviews? Are they locking down their S3 buckets? Are they making sure that there's no default creds out there for your instance of their portal or whatnot? So again, I'm not saying that Crashlytics or LeanPlum or AdFly or whoever is necessarily bad. But what I'm saying is when you're using these applications, your data is going to a shit ton of places that you may not be expecting it is when you sign up for LeanPlum or letgo or what have you. So I'm not going to continue down this road, but if you want to see some of this data and I can give you a little bit more of a demo, see me after. Sorry, real quick. So a blog coming out. I said this a couple months ago, or last month when I talked to BSides Knoxville. It's actually coming out this week. So if you check Invisium's blog, you'll see my blog post, which breaks down analytics on the analytics, which I know is a little meta. But I'm going to go through and say, like, hey, this number of apps use my location. This number of apps did this to this many third parties. I'm going to continue down the road of trying to research into this. One route that I'm going to take, and I know Josh knows this, the Software Engineering Institute out of Carnegie Mellon, the CERT, they actually have a tool called Tapioca, which allows you to create a man in the middle and ephemeral OVA for Android apps, and you can basically go through and scan a bunch of Android apps really quickly. So if you're interested in pursuing this route, CERT Tapioca, Google that. I'm going to go down further automation, and honestly, as I continue to help my clients, I'm going to keep flagging when I see my clients' data going to third parties. But I'm one person, right? The reason I talked about this is to educate all of you, and maybe you can start doing your own research, or you can start flagging this for your internal audits or your clients or your whatnot, and just at least have an idea of how big of a threat profile you have on external domains that you may not own. So again, call to action. I need more folks looking at this. Use the tools that I'm going to post in the follow-up blog. And if you have any questions for legal activities, again, I can't tell you to go out and use IDOR on an analytics server that you don't have access to try to find other people's analytics. But you can absolutely look at your own traffic and analyze your own traffic and see what's going on in your own device. So if you have any questions about stuff that you come across and it's legal, above board activity, ping me. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn. You have all my contact information. And thank you to the BSides staff. You guys are awesome. Volunteers, attendees, vendors, family. I'll open up for like a minute of questions. Anyone? Yes.
Why do you still use a phone?
So the question is, why do I still use a phone? I'm a mobile guy. I just talked about this, and this isn't from my personal phone, but on my personal phone, I have like 100 apps, which is insane. So, yeah, I need to eat my own dog food a little bit, but at least I know the kind of stuff they can get, so I can then, say I'm going somewhere or I start doing illicit activities. Maybe I buy a burner phone or whatnot. Yes? Yes. Yes. So the question is, and this will be the last one, you can find me after, is, and I mentioned this, first-party apps, right, the app that you actually download, so Google Maps, has to ask you for a certain set of permissions. Those permissions keep getting more granular, and iOS and Android respectively now allow you to revoke permissions after the first download, which is great. So if you're worried about XYZ app, you can always go in and toggle off those things, and any analytics, SDKs, etc., that are installed for that specific app will no longer have access to that specific data that you're concerned about. But remember, if you want to use the Facebook Messenger app and you want to have a call with your significant other or someone in a different country or whatnot, but you don't want Facebook to have access to your microphone because you don't want them to target ads by microphone or whatnot, you can't necessarily, you have to pick one side or the other. Yes? Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. So the last thing. So his addendum to that was some newer versions of the operating system allow you to access temporary grants to some of these permissions, and then you can revoke them afterwards, which is a great point. Thank you for that. All right, thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Okay, we are in the home stretch. So, a couple of housekeeping little bits here. Amanda is coming. Amanda Berlin will be up in 2 minutes or so to close out BSides Cleveland 2018. And after she's done, if we can ask